All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that touches every single part of a business. I'm talking about human resource management, or HRM. Now, you might think of it as just paperwork and policies, but it's so much more than that. It's really the engine that runs on a company's most valuable asset. And you know what? This quote from N.R. Narayana Murthy just hits the nail on the head. He says, even in the most automated factory imaginable, you still need the power of the human mind. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? In a world that's so obsessed with tech and automation, the real thing that gives a company its edge, it isn't a machine, it's the people. So if you've ever studied management, you've probably heard of the classic 5 M's. It's this framework that breaks down the core resources you need to run a business. You've got your money, your machines, materials, and methods. But that 5th M, well, that's the one we're really digging into today. Originally, it was called MEN, but of course we now call it human resources. And let me tell you, it is by far the most complex and the most critical piece of that whole puzzle. Which really leads us to the big question, right? If people are so unique and so valuable, what's the best way to actually manage them? I mean, how do you do it effectively? Well, as you're about to see, the answer to that question has changed a lot over the years. Okay, so before we get to the modern way of doing things, we've got to take a step back. Let's look at the old playbook, how we used to think about managing people. It'll really show you just how far we've come. So this whole journey to modern HRM, it didn't happen overnight. It came in phases. At first, you had this idea of people as just a commodity. Then it kind of shifted to a more fatherly or paternalistic view. And eventually, we started to recognize basic human rights. Let's dig into those first 2 ideas.
Yeah, in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, the thinking was, well, it was brutally simple. Labor was just another thing you'd buy and sell. It was a line item on a spreadsheet, no different from buying a tin of steel or a new piece of machinery. There was almost zero thought given to the actual person doing the work.
Okay, so then things started to change. Workers began to organize into unions, and some employers switched gears. They adopted what we call a paternalistic approach, kind of like, we're the boss and we'll take care of you. They started providing welfare programs, better conditions, this protective, almost fatherly role. And look, it was definitely an improvement over treating people like spare parts, but it still created this weird power dynamic. It saw employees as dependents, not as actual partners in the business.
But that whole dependency model, it just wasn't sustainable. People realized the old ways had serious limits. And that realization paved the way for a revolutionary shift in thinking. We moved from just administering people to strategically managing them as human resources. And honestly, this was a total game changer.
And here was the big breakthrough, the aha moment. People finally realized that the old idea, that a happy worker is automatically a productive worker, was just way too simple. It's not that easy. This new behavioral science approach recognized that every single employee is a unique, complex individual. What gets me excited to come to work might be totally different from what motivates you. So the focus had to shift from just keeping people content to truly understanding them as valuable, unique assets. And when you put them side by side, the difference is just stark. I mean, look at this. Old school personnel management, it was all short-term, reactive, bureaucratic, and its main goal was to minimize the cost of labor. But modern HRM, it's the complete opposite. It's long-term, proactive, flexible, and it's all about maximizing the potential of your people. This is that fundamental shift we're talking about, from just pushing papers to building a real business strategy. So that brings us to what HRM really is today. It's not just about hiring and firing anymore. It's a strategic way of managing your people to build a team that is super committed and super capable. And here's the kicker. The end goal isn't just to manage people. The goal is to get a real competitive advantage in the marketplace because of your people. Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this all look like in the real world? What is the modern HRM game plan? What do these people actually do all day to make those big strategic goals happen?
Well, modern HRM is basically a big juggling act. It has to balance 4 different objectives at the same time. First, it has to be socially and ethically responsible. That's the societal piece. Then it has to directly contribute to the company's bottom line, the organizational goal. It also has to make sure its own department runs smoothly. That's the functional part. And finally, it has to help every single employee reach their own goals. It is a constant juggle. And here's how that juggling act actually works. You can see how those big picture objectives turn into real actions. So to hit those organizational goals, HR is doing things like planning for future hiring needs, selecting the right talent, and training them. And to help employees with their personal goals, well, that's where compensation, development programs, and performance reviews come in. See? Every single function has a clear purpose tied to one of those bigger objectives.
Okay, so we've seen what HR does, but let's zoom out a bit and talk about why this all matters so much. Because when a company gets people management right, the impact, it ripples out way beyond just the office walls. It affects the business, sure, but it also affects society as a whole. You can kind of see that ripple effect right here. It starts at the center, at the corporate level, where good HRM helps the company hit its goals. Then it radiates out to the professional level, improving life for every employee. Go out another layer, and you see the social impact. It enhances the dignity of labor itself. And then, at the national level, a whole country full of well-managed workers. That becomes a massive engine for economic growth. It all starts with how you treat people. Another way to think about it is that HR is like the heart of the organization. It's this central system that pumps the lifeblood, the people, to every other part of the body. Think about it. The quality of your finance team, your marketing team, your tech team, it all depends on the people that HR brings in and develops. If the heart is weak, if your people management is failing, you're going to see problems pop up in every single department. It's unavoidable. So, if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Managing people effectively is not just an HR issue. It's not something you can just hand off to one department and forget about. It is a core business strategy. It's just as fundamental to your success as your financial plan or your marketing plan. Plain and simple, the quality of your people strategy is going to determine the success of your entire company. And that brings us right back to where we started. But with a new question for the future, we've seen this incredible evolution from treating people like commodities to seeing them as strategic partners. But now, with AI and automation changing the workplace so fast, what's the next chapter in this story? How are we going to manage the uniquely human skills, creativity, empathy, critical thinking that are becoming more valuable than ever in an increasingly automated world? That's the question we're all going to have to answer.